So let's talk about dive. And what is dive? So diving is when you jump into the ocean head first. No, it's actually when you attack things and with your aggressive units that have high mobility. So diving is a tactic where, let's say, you have staggered enemies like this, you want to kill them all. You have your units who can reach the back of the enemy formation go first, and then you have your units behind them go second. So basically, you want to think about it in terms of positioning and also in terms of getting to targets and killing targets. So in this case, Anna is in the front of the pack, and she's one of the few units who can reach this particular enemy back here. So what she should do is she should dive in this way, and she can attack this dude with 11 sword and one round him. So this is an example of dive. Now dive is usually set up so you usually don't just keep diving into enemies. You usually want to wait for opportunities. So for example, if there were like 5 enemies right here and I put Anna here, she's dead now. So you have to be able to recognize when it makes sense to dive. This is like essentially the opposite of turtling, but I would say turtling and dive should be used together, and you should use them as you need them. So in this case, all of my units are in a position where we can just dive straight into the enemy team and take the center. This map, I played it kind of passive just for the hell of it. It's honestly the best way to beat this map is just to chill in this corner and just kill everything that comes to you and just body block it. Fire block it, flame wall it with Corin when the tide goes down, and then they can't make progress. Pick them off from the flanks and just slowly beat the map easily. Getting the recover staff, you can do that, but it doesn't really matter. You don't need it. All right, so let's continue with our dive. So we can also go for breaks. So in this case, I can go for a momentum break on this enemy. Now, if I miss, I die, but I have a bunch of pulses. I'm about to beat the map, so I'm not too concerned. All right, so we got the break on that fast enemy. Now he's now at half health. This thing needs killed, so I will need something to deal with that. Which this almost deals with that. I just need the last hit. So last hitting is when you have something, an enemy who is almost dead, and you just need... I just missed a 96. So last hitting is like when an enemy's almost dead, you just need something to clean up the kill. All right, and then I'm going to RNG manipulate that hit. So all I'm going to do is just have someone else attack something else. So in this case, let's have Annette here go for that. Now, she doesn't die on counterattack, but she could miss the first hit. RNG seems to be predetermined in this game, but we'll go for this anyways. We'll see what happens. Let's see if she misses the first hit. Yeah. There seems to be some weird RNG nonsense where, like, if a hit misses, if things are similar hit rates, they tend to miss. So now when I go for this attack, it should hit, because it's re-rolling the RNG. It's dumb how it works, but it's how it works. I'd rather just things be consistent and more reliable, but that might be too much to ask for. All right, so we're diving into the enemy. Front hits, so it's front to back, back to front. The front of your units hit the back of their units, and the back of your units hit the front of their units. And you also want to make sure you have lethal damage on everything before you dive. But I have my entire team here, so it's just an issue of figuring out which units can kill. So Chimera might as well dive in here, get some damage on this. I also have a Dancer. Now, depending on how strong your units are, this tactic is more or less viable. Depends on your unit's strength. All right, so I'm going to go for, let's see. I might get a Luna proc and kill him, so I'm going to go for that. Yep, there's Luna. He's dead. He actually has high enough dex that Luna, I think, is like 60% chance to happen at least once. Yeah, he's almost to that point. 27 dex. He's starting to snowball a little bit. Proud of him. And then we can take this unit. She can go in. So back to front in this case. We're hitting the front of their forces with the back of ours. Because if you have the front of your forces hit the front of theirs, then the back can't reach their back because of the distance gap. So you want to do it in this way. Alright, let's see what you can accomplish, Ivy. Alright, you get doubled, but you put good damage on them, so I'm going to allow it. Now, if you have turns to heal, you can trade health for damage. So she's going to take some serious damage and almost be dead, but because there's no enemies nearby, I have like a turn or two to heal everyone. So I'm not too concerned about that. And then all we have to do is just clean up the rest of these enemies. So let's see. I can 11 sword. So I have to make sure I kill this. She actually hits 0 damage on that. I can dance someone to kill that. So we'll go for the 11 sword kill on this. The dancer can hit a flyer and then last hit that other flyer. And we're just pushing into the rest of their forces. Alright, so I can set up an easy... Let's see, do you have a tomahawk? He has a ranged weapon, yeah. Let's go for it. What do you got? Spear? He should hit this. I mean, it's more likely, but I can dance someone else as well. Alright, he got it.
Victory pose.
And then there's one more enemy left. So I'm going to wrap around it so I can advance more. And then it easily dies to any of these. So yeah, that is diving in a nutshell. It's like an overview of diving. It's really useful to know when it makes sense to dive. It's one of these things where the more you play the game, the more you know when it makes sense to actually push into the enemies. And the more it makes sense, or the more you know when it makes sense to like hold a position. So in this situation, this is the perfect opportunity to dive into the enemy team and take ground because most of the reinforcements have triggered, if not all of them. And from this point onward, you know, we might as well advance our army before the water rises. Yeah, there's like some stragglers. Those guys are going to get cut off by the water. So we can actually continue pushing in. This can be easily killed. Anna can one-run that, no problem. Anyone else can be fed the kill. I'll just have Anna kill it just because it's convenient. So she'll just one-round this dude. So turtling and diving kind of are like two sides of the same coin. You need both of them. They're both useful. There are some maps where, unless you're going to warp skip it, it's almost impossible to dive the map because there's just too high of enemy density. So unless you're running some kind of crazy strat, like Bonded Shield, and your units are virtually unkillable, you still need to be careful. And you can't just always dive. So knowing when to dive is important. And the key to knowing when to dive is looking for opportunities. And you can find weird opportunities. Like sometimes, let's say, I'll give some, like a theoretical position or whatever. So like, let's say you start, well, actually, let's just say you're here, right? And there's enemies up here. There's enemies over here. There's enemies in every direction. However, these enemies are in clusters and there's no enemies beyond them. So for example, the enemies up here, there's no like enemies over here. So you could dive this position and then you move away from this position, which has enemies, this position which has enemies, and this position which has enemies. So if you were to dive into here, you kill them, clean them up, and then you displace 3 groups of enemies who now need to push into you to get to you. They now have to chase you. So when enemies have to chase you, you're basically tanking by position, right? You're tanking in terms of your positioning. So it's really useful to find opportunities to dive small clusters of enemies that are out of position or that are away from their main army. And that can actually be a very effective way of routing most maps. So I highly recommend looking for those opportunities. And the key thing too is you have to make sure you're close enough. So like sometimes if you go to dive and the enemies are just out of range, so like say there's enemies here, and instead of my team being here, they're like down here and only 2 or 3 flyers can get in. If they can't kill all these enemies and one of these enemies can one-round me on enemy phase, you shouldn't dive that. You should wait until you have the position. So positioning is always very important in this game. It's probably like the most important thing about just like playing this game. But yeah, recognizing opportunities is huge and finding those opportunities. And in some cases you can make them. So for example, you could dive with a Lucina Bonded Shield. You can have, if you have Canter and you have like 3 or 4 flyers, you can attack a position, you don't need to clear it, and then you just line them up in a plus shape, put the Bonded Shield in the middle, and then they can tank on enemy phase. So you can dive with Bonded Shield into any position as long as you set it up correctly and can tank it properly. So there are more advanced ways of using dive. This is also the reason I don't like tank comps, because tank comps can't just like go nuts and just like dive into a huge group of enemies without being warped or something, whereas flyers can just inherently disregard terrain and just chill out on like, you know, out of bounds areas for other units. So yeah, that's it for this one. Definitely like and subscribe. Feel free to drop a comment as to tactics you use and what type of tactics you use, because I'm curious about that. And I'll see you in the next one.